Speaking of confidently, I'll say this. Penn State was one I really struggled with. Penn State's over-under is set at 8.5. And I almost went definitive over. This is the best bet in the division. I couldn't do it. But why I think Penn State is really interesting is a couple things. One, James Frankin almost has that Jim Harbaugh vibe that I just discussed a minute ago. We focus on COVID 2 years ago, 7-5 last year, and you can't ignore 7-5. We're going to get into that 7-5 in a minute. But from 2016 to 2019, for 4 years, now keep in mind that was about when Harbaugh had Michigan at peak, when Urban Meyer was still at Ohio State. Here is what James Franklin did in terms of regular season wins. 10 wins in 2016, 9 wins in 2017, 10 wins in 2018, 10 wins in 2019. They won a couple bowl games, had a couple 11-win seasons in the mix there. And so this is a guy that wins big outside of COVID and outside of last year. Now, you can't ignore last year where they went 7-5. But what I will say is, by Big Ten standards, they probably had the toughest schedule in the entire Big Ten. For people who forget, they opened at Wisconsin. They played at Iowa, at Ohio State, at Michigan State, Michigan at home, Auburn at home. And then on top of that, some of those losses were just brutal. They played at Iowa. They're up 17-3, and their starting quarterback, Sean Clifford, goes down. They end up losing 20-17. They can't score once he leaves the game. They get a bye. They come back the following week. They play Illinois. Sean Clifford's not at 100%. That was that awful game that they lost in 9 overtimes. Yes, 9 overtimes against Illinois with the new overtime rule. It was terrible. I hate it. I hope they someday change it. And then the Michigan game. They played Michigan late in the season. Michigan is trending towards a playoff. Penn State had the lead with under 4 minutes to go. Michigan scores a big play for a touchdown and ends up winning the game. And so I just bring it up to say they're almost the opposite of Michigan State. Michigan State had a lot of breaks along the way. Penn State really had a lot of breaks go against them, and they lost their final game of the regular season 30-27 at Michigan State. I feel like they were probably closer, in my opinion, to 9-3 than they were 7-5. Despite it, though, here's why I can't get behind them as a definitive, I'm planting my flag at Penn State going over 8.5 wins. First of all, it's a quarterback. It's Sean Clifford, and I'm not trying to disparage the kid, but he's been a 3-year starter. He's no better today, or at least coming into this season, than he has been. Each of the last 2 years, 60% completion percentage. Last year, he was solid. 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, but he wasn't elite by any stretch. He's never been elite. I don't think he's going to be elite. And oh, by the way, maybe their best chance is almost like Clemson, right? We talk about Clemson. Is Cade Klubnik going to eventually take that spot from DJ Uiagalelei? Remember, Penn State has a 5-star backup in Drew Allaire. We'll see if he gets some run by the end of the season if things do not go well. Sean Clifford does have some talent around him, by the way. Nick Singleton, 5-star running back. Mitchell Tinsley, a transfer from Western Kentucky that had 87 catches and 14 touchdowns last year. But it still comes back to I can't hitch my wagon to Penn State to win 9 games with Sean Clifford as its quarterback, not to mention the schedule. And look, like I said, last year was brutal. This year's a little bit more manageable. Last year they had at Wisconsin, at Iowa. This year, thankfully for them, they have neither of those teams. But where I get tripped up is September. They play at Purdue the first Thursday of the season. They're already a small favorite in the DraftKings Sportsbook, about a 4-point favorite. But opening night, national TV audience, I could see some weird things happening. And they also play at Auburn early in the season. And what I would say is if you're going to play Auburn, you don't want it to be early. Because if Auburn starts 2-3, they shouldn't with their schedule. But if Auburn loses a couple games, that's when you want to get them because that's when the locker room is down. Maybe they know Brian Harsin isn't coming back. But you get them early. Auburn should be 2-0 coming into that game. You barely beat Auburn at home last year. Now you're going to Jordan Hare. I don't think it's a good look. So Penn State's another one. They're just the classic stay away to me. They're right on that 8-9 win border. I could see the scenario where they could go 10-2. I could also see the scenario where they lose on opening night to Purdue. They lose in week 3 to Auburn on the road, and you're sitting there scratching your head having that over ticket thinking that they can't really lose very much more going forward. So that one's just a stay away to me.